They're like, no, don't tell the truth about us filming you fucking naked and why you're doing this. You're raising awareness about our fucking straight up psychopathic crimes. No, don't do that. No, 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 no. No, no, no. You're not allowed to tell the truth. No. Like I said, yo, this is a government.
I was like, ah, oh my
Alright, there we
god.
go. At least we got this shit.
Like, you're all in the wrong for this shit. Edgar has to come out there. He fucking assaults me. He fucking commits a hit and run, and he's drinking and driving on a video that I capture. And y'all DEA, and I'm not the only one looking at that shit. Is what I'm saying, y'all. Which is what's so weird to me. It's just I get my protein from because his.
It's not funny, yo. The fact that you're pushing things to this point, it's really not fucking funny.
Got it for the rest of my life, yo. The rest of my life. Alright, so for any consensual viewers, I'm sorry, it's really weird. I go back and forth. It's not mental illness. It's not bipolar. It's me. I'm on the autism spectrum, so I'm like really actually in control of that shit. To be honest, DEA needs to hear it.
That's
how
true,
it needs to be said, is what I'm saying. And how would you feel if you're filmed naked without your consent for years in a super fucking defamatory
So the thing
way
is,
by a bunch of people who are straight up the #1 sex traffickers on the face of the planet?
I'm just not sure why the title didn't change,
Eric
but let's change the
Morris
title now.
of Victory City Church in Pflugerville, Texas. Yeah, I'm talking Debbie in Austin, Texas. I don't even know her last name.
Publish. Any clothes I have, I'm like of course, right? But I'm not hiding anything, and nor was I back then, and that's what was so kind of like despicable and illegal about the entire situation is like they lorded that equipment over me for so long, and then to be honest, it's just psychotic as fuck to what they did. They let a group of people sit around with streaming that shit, and the thing was I didn't know if the state authorities knew what they were doing, because the way that my coworkers worked for a long time, I don't like to talk about past business, right? But we really, I'm not kidding. I cannot emphasize enough how educated I am about tech and computer science. Like when I was at this company, their entire operation in remote development really relied upon me in some ways. They needed somebody that was like a really hard worker that, the hardware stuff is basically like nothing for me. And then the software stuff is, well, it's kind of like nothing as well. It just, I just have to learn things that I didn't know yet. And that's the thing, I learned so quickly, and they were all complimenting, and like really every single person is like, wow, you learned that so fast. The other guy that started here, it took him 8 months before he was even doing that. You're doing that on your second week here. Like I'm not kidding. Like time and time and time again, I'm getting the most. Like, I'm definitely self-aware enough. I'm constantly like, y'all. Like, that used to bother me when I'm not saying it should have bothered me, but when I first, would visit Texas, and, because we had some family that lived down in Texas. Part of the reason that, we ended up there. And we were visiting, before that, like for vacations, and I always had such an amazing time. It's like part of what's so, kind of bitter about the way I've been treated. Like I've always loved Texas, and they just like turned on me and treated me like I'm this fucking schizo alien evil piece of shit. And a lot of it has to do with like culture war bullshit because they found this name. Yeah, you mentioned outside. Do you mind me asking, like North Austin or South Austin? I think you said outside of Austin. I'm sorry. I do also have a bit of a stutter. That stutter only developed after that car accident. I'm not really embarrassed about it. I let people know when it happens sometimes because it's a good thing to know that I do have to stutter a little bit. Hour away. Oh yeah, I know about Killeen. Yeah, and that is also kind of a part of the story. I really like. It's a long story, but are you military or your family military? Gotcha. Yeah, so I'm fully in support. To be honest with you, I've always wanted to go into the army, and even throughout this, I went to a recruiter in Austin. One of them was super chill towards me. The other one was kind of the total opposite, and that's part of the whole aspect of this is really difficult. Like, basically, I told the first recruiter, I was like, look, here's the situation. You know, I didn't tell him all this, right? Nobody had this context. My great grandfather on my mom's side was Army, and he was a turret gunner in World War II. My grandfather was Army, and following that, he sold insurance. And then I've got other family that's Army, right? And really, one of he's technically not a blood relative, but it's only because of this situation I haven't been talking to him. Oh, you need that. Just like I'm that kind of person. They don't admit it over again a lot. Myself and anything is because it's not really. It's like part of the reason that I'm like I really love this state, and I haven't been talking to him more. I've got other family that's Army, right? And really, one of he's technically not a blood relative, but it's only because of this situation I haven't been talking to him more. I always considered him a brother. As soon as we met in Texas, he was like part of the reason that I'm like I really love this state and I love this culture. And to be honest with you, it's one of the most difficult things because it's not really. How do I put this best? It's like it's a combination of social and political aspects that have created this chasm between myself and anyone in my family. And that's what I've been trying to bring everyone's attention to is like I love my family so much, but they've chosen their politics for like over and over and over again. A lot of them. I'm not saying that cousin necessarily. I'm not even naming names. That's what's difficult is that the whole time I'm kind of like, yo, you need to understand like perjury has actually been committed, right? Part of what happened is that there were real crimes committed to frame me in real life. And I'll be honest, it was the most cliche hacker shit, if I need to say it that way. Real criminal hackers of a caliber that a lot of people are just not familiar with in this day and age. Like in software, for example, if I was in Silicon Valley and this shit went down, the state of California would have been like, oh no, okay, that's like, yeah, that's some hacker shit, like, tech company, grievances, like he communicated confidentially. But in Texas, unfortunately, right, they're like, oh no, like, and that's the thing, they committed real crimes on my internet.
Single fucking adult conversation, and none of you is really, it's just like, I love Texas, y'all, so why do you want to be so fucking terrible? Like, I'm one of your own, whether or not you want to behave that way. I've spent over half my life there, and no, never for a moment did I have to tolerate you people victimizing innocent people because of how much you fucking hate me.
I'm that kind of person, like I've the internet in some ways is part of the reason I'm so educated my whole life. A lot of positive influences, Martin Luther King, JFK, and even the sentiment of Walt Disney is like never stop, using your creativity and your imagination. And that's part of what sucks is there's so much, polarization in our politics. From the beginning of me forming any political perspective, it's always been an aspect. Is I'm looking out in 2012 at like, wow, there's a lot of Russian propaganda on our internet, and it's like dividing all of us. The intent of this propaganda is not really just to quote, what people would accuse is like You think they're just being brainwashed by the Russian. That's how easily they write it off. But they don't realize that most of the propaganda is not really intended just to brainwash. It's to polarize, right? They focus on what we call these wedge political issues. And so in some ways, I've encouraged people to watch the documentary Get Me Roger Stone, because, well, there's a lot of documentaries involved in this in some ways that I can use as like a piece of reference. Roger Stone, I've said, how do I put this best? I don't really like politics. And like a Canadian coworker to me one time is like, hey, my name is Caleb. He was like, hey, Caleb, like you could be the president. I was like, to be honest with you, sir, I don't want to be the president. The target that puts on your back is like relentless. The way that our politics are, it's like you don't even have, a breath to take without somebody, just throwing shit at you. Like you can't, our politics really, they're so vitriolic many times. And, straight up, I guess, part of what I'm explaining is that, there's an arrogance, even in my opinion, projected arrogance, quite frankly. I'm one of the people that's like, well, everybody tells their kid, like, if you want to and you put your mind to it, you could be the president someday, right? And like, that's like almost even a cliche. Well, I mean it. I'm just the kind of person that I don't really seek money, I don't seek power, and I don't seek influence. And that's a huge part of my worldview and my philosophy is that, to be honest with you, I have career aspirations, don't get me wrong, but they're not driven by money. And that's kind of the whole point of everything that I've worked on in my life is like, I've never been frustrated. I really was illegally underpaid for the work that I was producing in Austin. And I wasn't even mad about that. They're giving me Employee of the Month award after award after award. There's all of these emails and resounding feedback. It's like, wow, you saved the day again. You saved the day. It's like, oh, okay, like, I appreciate that. But, we're understaffed. And, to be honest with you, like, nobody should be having to save the day. Like, I need you to realize in the bigger picture, like, the fact that someone like me has 1,000,001 responsibilities that I just continue absorbing, like I'm, some, magician with technology around here. I really was, for this one dude, I was just like this super techno autistic genie. He's just like, hey, I need you to go and do this. And it's like, sure, that's going to take 2 days of research and then I'll present to you some solutions. Like, okay, sounds good. It's like, okay, I got 1,000,001 other things to do. Like, all right, but that's what I really need to emphasize. While I am really passionate, technology is, it's kind of like my main passion in life, and it really has been in terms of, I've just always wanted to understand how computers work from the ground up, right? And that's kind of where the things like this actually come from. It's not that it's so, world changing, but what I'm saying is it's all kind of about implementation in a lot of cases. It's one of the reasons that one of my career aspirations was. I'm not sponsored in any way, and I'm not even like disappointed if it never happens or if it never would have. But like, I always sort of was like, man, my philosophy, my worldview, like Steve Jobs is always a huge influence for me in my technological, sort of pursuits and career. And part of the reason for that as well, I was also a fan of Steve Wozniak. I'm one of the people that, like, I point out, I'd rather learn how to be both and look up to both than I would, just be a Steve Jobs or just be a Steve Wozniak. So part of what I saw is that, people give Steve Jobs crap because he wasn't really an engineer himself. You know what I mean? And Apple couldn't have started without Steve Wozniak. It's the honest to God truth. Steve, both Steves. It's so weird that they have the same name. Both Steves, they're fundamental. And it's actually one of those things where, as much as we hear even just a brand name Apple, and they're such a big company now, they're obviously, this behemoth of a company, I think it's easy for us to forget that, wow, single individuals and single companies can actually change the entire world and the entire landscape of tech. And I've done many a recording on the topic, but I haven't published all of them. And that's one of the things about me is that I'm not a perfectionist, but I'm very chosen with my words. And I don't normally like to work this way where I'm just streaming everything that I'm doing, if that makes sense. And so in this context, I guess part of what's weird, right? I'm using 2 iPhones. Well, I'm not some Apple fanboy. Part of the context about iPhones is just that I'm really genuinely a computer scientist, like definitely going to have a PhD in computer science someday. It's not some grandiose thing, right? How weird of me to say when I'm, not even done with my undergrad, but that's kind of what I mean is like, I love education. I love learning. And Steve Jobs, for example, he would audit classes. Like, he would actually, and I'm not even sure if he signed up for all of them. Like, to my knowledge, he might have just like gone to some classes because he was able to go up there and like, blend in for a moment. But part of what I'm saying is that, I think that he was such an intelligent man in a way that people still to this day argue about what was really valuable about Steve Jobs, and to be honest with you, I think it's something that we could argue about all day long and not necessarily come to a single answer. And that's where it's like, okay, another influence for me as soon as I learned about him is a man, Alan Turing. There's a really good movie in my opinion about his story to some extent called The Imitation Game. He was a computer scientist through and through, but he was also kind of a logician, like first and foremost. And that, for me, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I really love philosophy, particularly, and people give philosophy so much shit these days. It kind of bothers me, right? Because people act like philosophy and Christianity are like, some kind of battle between one another. But it's like, wait a minute, anybody that really studies in seminary, cameras on your phones are great too. I appreciate it, man. Okay, I will be honest with you. The shower stream is not intended to be I called it what it is, right? Is a non-sexual, but I'm actually not joking. This is okay. One of the things in Voyager, I think I've got the notes up on a Voyager 0 there still. In the top left, right? If you see on there, it says, make your greatest weakness your greatest strength. Well, this name, Voyager, Voyiigur, it had nothing to do with Apple. Let me emphasize that. Not trying to be mean, but I am emphasizing it. Nothing to do with Apple. The two eyes really did represent my two main passions in life, technology and psychology. Well, if you think about it, and this is how my brain kind of works, it's like, if those are my two passions in life, then that should go a long way to informing people why things like propaganda, misinformation, and even politics. It's like, I don't really particularly like politics, if I'm being honest, but it's mostly because of the vitriol and the bitterness that is, just continually like slung into our political spheres. And to be honest with you, that's part of what I'm saying. I think, I could see more interest in politics if it were not what I was just explaining, that these days, if you're in politics, it just, again, not that it didn't in the past, right? I'm referencing people like John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, both of whom, unfortunately, bless their souls, were assassinated. But when it comes down to it, it's like, I honestly, I think that, the truth is, those two main interests in life actually sort of should help people understand that, propaganda in this day and age with social media, where there's so much argument about how, what it even is. Actually, there's so much disagreement about, well, could Russia, what is collusion, right? Even that question, and so to emphasize about that, the shower thing, making non-sexual. I don't have a huge penis. Let me emphasize that. I don't really want to talk about it in a way, I'm not trying to be misleading. I didn't put a sock in there or anything like that. I don't have a huge dick. I don't have a tiny dick. I'm a grower, not a shower. That's what I will say. I have a very average sized penis. That's what's weird to me. These people film me naked with reckless abandon, and then they've talked shit about my dick.
All right, y'all the ones that talked about my dick before I did, so I'm not.
Nope,
you asked for it, but there you go. That's pretty much the best way to say it. It's very fucking average. Every proportion of my body, to be honest.
What's so shitty? It's like everything else in this is really
not something I've ever been insecure about in reality. Like, all this shit talking to the world, y'all cannot change that.
Not even halfway close to what qualifies as, quote, a micro penis. But I think the problem is, being a grower, not a shower, right? And even like, for example, like, there's, vasoconstricted. I guess it's not huge though, is what I'm saying. I don't know how it, appears there. Like, I guess, in this day and age, that's part of what I'll emphasize, right? I wish that pornography, for example, I don't really watch a lot of porn, but that's been, part of the contention here as well. I really do mean it. They've accused me of every fucking thing under the sun, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that perjury was freely allowed from the beginning, right? So they're trying to treat me like I'm a sex addict. Well, like, I'll be honest, my partner knew better than anyone. I've really, and it's a complicated situation, like, it was kind of a bad, it was a little bit of an unhealthy relationship at times, if I'm being honest. Because she actually really was obsessive and insecure for the first, 4 years of our relationship. I'm not trying to be mean or talk down upon, a past relationship. But she was really deeply insecure to the point where, the first time we broke up, the conversation, I didn't want to talk about it, honestly. I did in another stream recently. she just was like, are you gonna marry me? And I was like, well, I'm just not sure if I can answer yet. That was all, right? It's like, I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes, I just don't know.
Look, I want to emphasize, since I didn't get there to talking about this yet, y'all. Look, the thing that I was about to say about make love not porn and just porn in general, in this context especially, it's been brought to my attention many of you are suffering from this, yo. And I've always noticed this is a problem, honestly. Like, you know, I'm not trying to talk down on porn companies necessarily. Well, way out there you say that. Well, I kind of am in some. All right, we got to get over the entire, like, every single porn video is all about, like, yeah, give me your giant fucking dick. Yeah, give me your dick is so big. Like for real, y'all. Yeah, why does it even, like, for real? I think that some of you don't realize you watch a lot of porn, and you're watching porn where, like, you know, you're more obsessive about penis size than I will ever be, you know, and like you projected that shit on me so much now that you'll have me talking about it, y'all. You're fucking obsessive about that shit, like, straight up. Like, you care 100% more about my penis than I give a single fuck about, like, for real, whether it's my penis, your penis, like, I don't care at all. Like, you're clearly fucking obsessive about penises, yo. And that's the thing, like, that tells me you watch too much porn, and you watch too much porn that's, like, unhealthy, like, you know, like, giant fucking dick, 12-inch dick fucking porn, like that's what you want. You're like, I could never satisfy a female if I don't have a fucking giant 12-inch penis, like.
Oh, right? It's like, you're putting me on the spot. And really, she's like, okay, then I want to break up. No, we hadn't had sex. You know, we hadn't, like, there was nothing. There was no, you know, like, major commit. We had made out. That was all that had happened. We had made out, you know, and, like, not even, like, super sexual making out. And I'm not even saying we should have. What I'm saying is I was just, like, bizarrely confused about, you know, that. And so let me emphasize with for example, I think that we get so tribal about, well, insecurity in some ways. For example, I'll speak to the psychology. You know, I do wish there is a porn producer out there. It's called Make Love Not Porn, right? And I think we need more of that kind of stuff. What I mean is that, like, people that are openly, you know, kind of, because there's so much. Well, she wanted to marry me, to be honest with you, because she had a lot of problems with insecurity.
Come up to me
and one of the things that
fucking
she,
porn.
you know, told me really early on in the relationship is that she had this deep,
straight up fucking bigot. You're gonna hear about it for the rest of your goddamn lives. You fucking psychopath.
Right? We're in, you know, late high school, right? So it's not anything, you know, risque. We drive somewhere and find a place, right? And, like, you know, and honestly, look how honest I'll be about that kind of stuff in this context, right? It's like, we're not being sneaky, you know, we're just like, we're not gonna sit in our parents' house and make out, like, you know, it's so weird, you know. Some of the quote adults around this have just not acted like adults at all. But the reason that she really wanted to marry me, if I'm being honest, like, I am a good person, don't get me wrong, you know, I'm a good person to be, you know, a partner with, but even among all this bullshit, quite frankly. But she told me, she was like, I've suffered from this deep, dark depression since, well, middle school, and my family doesn't know, and I'm happy now because of you. And I was like, you know, the difficult thing is, I'm like, the nuance of that, you know, being so educated about psychology, I swear to God, the very first thing in my mind is just like, I cannot respond to this like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad that I cured your depression, because there's no person that can cure her depression, right? That's what I'm saying. It's like, I didn't cure her depression. You know, I appreciated the sentiment, and I told her that, right? I wasn't cold in my response. I'm a human being, and I'm not some, you know, cool, calculated, like, I'm a human being, right? So I'm kind of like, well, I really do appreciate that, but, you know, I would appreciate if you did tell your family, because they should know, honestly. And on top of that, I would appreciate if you know, we're willing to get kind of therapy and counseling. And I mean, I really mean it. I swear to God, that's what I said to her, because your depression is not going to go away. That we're kind of, you know, talk about the honeymoon phase of a relationship. That's kind of what it was for us. It's like, you're kind of in the honeymoon, you know, and I did. I'll be honest, like, I was still figuring out, you know, I thought that I loved her at the time, is what was complicated, you know, and I did, honestly, definitely, we really did love one another for a long time. This made a lot of this really painful. We really did love one another, and then things got so bitter because, well, quite frankly, they shouldn't have, but, you know, I'll be honest, that was what was complicated. Long story short, you know, I didn't cheat on her, but we broke up. We had been breaking up on and off so much that, well, some of the arguments, they weren't abusive, and really, even at the time, let me point out the one thing that was actually abusive is that she was so insecure. She was telling me she didn't want me to, for example, she didn't want me to work out. I'm not kidding. She didn't want me to go run at the soccer field. She didn't want me to lift weights. And this is what she was saying. She was like, well, you're going to get more and more fit. And then everybody's going to say, she's actually confessing this to me at the time. She's like, everybody's going to say that that we're not a good match because like you're so fit and like you have muscles and stuff. And I was like, I'm not trying, that I'm not trying to get muscles. I was training for college soccer. Let me emphasize. When I started training, my brother he got really into fitness after he stopped playing college soccer in some ways, which was kind of, understandable actually, right? He stopped focusing on trying to play soccer. He was like, okay, I'll take that time and put it towards weightlifting, right? And so he was part of the reason. I'll be honest, it was really manipulative at the time. And that's the kind of thing I'm not the kind of person I don't need to go talk to people about that. You know what I mean? I don't, even if, to a friend here or there, I might be like, yeah, that was kind of crappy. And that's the thing, everybody's a human being, like later in the relationship, this is kind of what happened, right? So we're really on and off. The first time that we break up, we had not even broken up before that. And it was, I was going to one school. And, to be honest with you, we had this conversation. Like I said, she put me on the spot about marriage. And that's actually how we broke up in that conversation because I was like, well, I just can't say yes. I'm not saying no, but I can't say yes. She was like, okay, then we should break up. And I was like, well, okay. And that's how we broke up. And she was so mad. She was so bitter. Like I'll be honest, in retrospect, she was kind of like straight up almost psychotic in how angry she was. And I didn't really ever want to say it that way. But that's what was so complicated is because I went to a school in Dallas and I made friends, and some of them were really good friends. That's what sucks. I made some friends that were, platonic female friends. I made some friends that were platonic female friends that turned into a little bit more than platonic, but we weren't like, hooking up full, you know what I mean? Like we were being intimate occasionally, right? And it wasn't like, but in a healthy way. Like in retrospect, that's what sucks is I'll be honest, any number of those relationships were like so much healthier than, the one that I had with her, this main long-term ex. But the problem was, I think we were both very attracted, both, emotionally and physically to one another. And so when, I was back, like we were in the same friend group, you know what I mean? So our friend group is like, let's hang out again, we're home. And so we're both around each other a lot. And, it's just really difficult to kind of tell myself like, no, like it's probably not the best, right? And I think deep down, I kind of was like, I'm not sure if this is the best. But the thing was, I really loved her, and so I knew, that's the thing, I guess, to give more context, she was calling me almost every single day for like 6 straight months when I was in Dallas. And I was just like, you have to get help. I'm not kidding. I was like, I do care about you. But she would call me and I'm like, every time she's like, hey, I'm gonna stop calling you. I'm like, okay, we're broken up. She's like, but I'm actually gonna stop this time. And it's like, okay, right? It's like, speaking of manipulative, it was actually really intense. I was like, I have one friend that I'll be honest, in retrospect, I do not think the best of his character, and I'll explain briefly why. I don't like to talk about this so much. But okay, for example, speaking of penis size, this man, I believe him when he says, I never saw his dick and I don't want to, if I'm being honest with you, right? He was like, yeah, I got an 8-inch dick. He was like, okay, man. Like, he was, all right, so to give context, where did we first meet, he and I?
I know
I'm not even completely sure where we did meet at school. It might have been even orientation. But, at first it was like, okay, we have some common interests, right? He was, he had a single mom his whole life. And he always I'll be honest, he told me that was kind of a source of stress and insecurity for him.
He was insecure as fuck.
His dad was never
Think
part
about
of
it.
his
That's
life
kind of what I'm saying. He was really fucking insecure.
But at the same time,
he was like,
his mom had made some comments that were a
like,
little
I
bit
believe him,
hurtful to him,
but that's
where
the
she was
thing.
like,
He had no like.
basically,
it
like
was
she
like
could have had
really
an
kind of
abortion.
bad. He
And
was
stuff.
like.
I know
really
that context
deeply
seems like it
insecure
doesn't seem
a
relevant,
month
but
ago, and he
the
was
thing
always
was though
like,
that this
oh,
guy
man,
had
I gotta
some
get
weird,
jacked like he is. Like,
psychological
I'm not
stuff
even
in terms
jacked,
of
but That's the thing, you know.
He
was,
wanted
always
to cuckold
kinda
this
insecure
chick.
about me,
That's actually what he was
honestly,
telling me, right? He was like,
seems
yeah, I
insecure
really
about
want to,
the
you know, like,
this
I guess he was
chick
into
trying to
that.
get with.
And I think that if I'm being honest, right, like a lot of people have psychologically analyzed me, and now it's kind of like going, you know, I'm not going back in time, but I'm saying like if people are going to play those games, I have no idea how much, well, more accurate and precise I will be than any of them combined. This guy, you know, he wanted to cuckold this Asian, you know, it's not, I'm not, you know, very anti-xenophobia, but this like, you know, tiny Asian woman, right? And she, that's the problem. She seemed like a really good person. He was being so manipulative. She was in
That was so
a
true. She
really
did seem like a good
long-term
person.
relationship
She
with
was.
basically her high school sweetheart. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to definitely, you know, break this shit up. And he's like telling me that. And I'm like, I'll be honest, all of these conversations, I wish someone was a fly on the wall now, because a lot of these people, because of the social and political aspects of this situation, like they've kind of, you know, wanted to go back in time. And, you know, I've always been such a private person. They know that I wasn't doing this, right? I wasn't out there like publishing myself. And so they kind of took advantage of the fact that like they've all had these like really deep, nuanced conversations with someone like me. You know, I'm one of those people, it's like you talk to me in person, it's kind of like irrefutable who I am. But when like in this day and age, especially on the internet, like, you know, if somebody's, it's almost like if a tree falls in the woods, like, does it even really exist? Is it capable of holding a conversation? And that's the thing, is like, there's so many people in my lifetime that, you know, some of the conversations we had, I'll be honest, they're kind of like, wow, that was, you know, I'm not saying it was straight up profound at all, but like I will ask people questions, and, you know, time and time again, I'm definitely one of those people that they're like, wow, you actually just really enjoy like the intellectual aspect of speaking with me. You're not trying to get anything. You're not trying to, you know, benefit in any way. Like, that's kind of rare these days, right? It's like I'm just not someone. I'm not trying to exploit the situation in any way. Like, I don't want anything from you. I don't want your money. I don't want influence. I'm not really seeking to, you know, to gain your favor, if I'm being honest. Like, and that makes it complicated. I think it almost intimidates people because I'm so conscious of that, you know, and some people at least. And I don't think, and I'll be the first to say, as a quote logician, it shouldn't intimidate people, is what I'm saying. It really should not. Because we need more of that in our world, in my opinion. We need more people that are less worried about. That's the thing. I'm the last person on the face of the planet that's about, quote, flexing. And that's kind of what I'm emphasizing about the shower stream thing. I wish that I was making it up. But they filmed me, and they're honestly, I say they, really, it's DEA. they during this pandemic, there was a lot of horror stories, quite frankly, under the Trump Department of Justice, and they fucking, they threw the book at themselves, if I'm being honest, is kind of one way to say it. Like, they straight up, like, were being so psychotic and terrible during this entire pandemic towards me. And to be honest with you, I'm the kind of person that's like, there's a point in this that's why I did the bathtub stream last night. It's on my VODs. And I'm sitting there, and of course now I'm just calmly sitting in a bathtub talking, right? It's like such a strange contrast to the image of before. I'm silent, right? These people are actually muzzling me, and it's hard to explain how and why. You know, I'll go back to my friend in Dallas in a minute, but basically they're trying to create a fraudulent image. Like I said, and I said my coworkers at this company. Well, that's the thing. They all worked together. It's like it's not mental illness. They're kind of like, basically this one man that was ex-Air Force intelligence that, used to be basically a family friend of mine. He had a lot of conversations with me about, the future of my career and, with stuff I was interested in doing. And, he told me some stuff that you would never tell anybody if you thought they were, quote, schizophrenic or, quote, suffering from psychosis. And that's what's so bizarre to me. He basically found out about, personal grievance with, his nephew and I in a way. And I'll be honest, his nephew didn't even have any, valid reason to be angry, but he wanted to go out of his way. Basically, speaking of, psychologically, analyzing people, that man, he always had some really, really deep-seated problems. And I was always helpful towards him about all of those things. I was basically like his, concierge
the
therapist.
dumb part is all of you even
behavior
think
from
that
people
you
at our
have,
job,
like,
our
space to
manager in
speculate
particular,
about that.
but also
Like,
just
oh, no,
long
yes,
before
he
that.
did. Like, no, you have
his
no
mother
fucking
passed away
idea,
when we
yo.
were in high
That's the
school,
problem.
and, in a way,
Like a
we became
logician,
really
I'll
close
point
friends
out,
because she
you are
used to
so
pick him up
stupid
from school.
if you
And
even
that's part of what
fucking
made it so
think
bitter for me. Like,
that
everybody's
you're in a
acted
place
like,
to
how
be
dare
like,
you?
like Daniel Wynn said,
he
some
was
things are
honestly, that's the problem.
unforgivable.
He was being
Like,
really
that's
abusive
how
towards me.
fucking
Then later,
childish
when
some of
we
you are
were
about
living
that
together
shit.
in
Like, I
Austin.
don't know what he's referring to.
And so I was like,
You have
look,
no
I
idea
didn't say a
how
word
fucking
about that
terrible
other
that
than
man was to
occasionally,
me. I
to
don't
like
think Daniel
one
win in
friend
this case.
who
I mean,
was
Michael
pretty
Brumback,
involved in, you know,
he
some
had
of
no
this and making
fucking
it
right to
happen.
be
He's
upset,
also
yo.
he's a Marine,
Zero.
right? And he's even saying to me himself, he's like, yeah, Marines were kind of like a fraternity, you know. I was like, I don't have anything bad to say about Marines in any way.